I'm so excited we get Maaike Fettah back.
So I still have Fight Club soap back on my bookshelf from Sunshine Alchemists,
That's
and
awesome.
I have sent gifts to other show guests because we do that sometimes, and
Mm.
ordered them from Maaike Fettah, Sunshine Alchemists. So she has for years supported domestic violence survivors. She's also an artist, and she's got some new things going on where she's doing projects to help survivors process their trauma through art. And she's got some really cool Web3 things going on as well that she's using to help with those initiatives. So we're going to talk all about that today.
Web 3.
And so
Backpack Show.
every time I see that, I want a yellow tux. Like I want to go get a yellow suit or something.
Oh, I look for a different person each time.
Like
So I looked at JB, the first lady, this last time.
I can't help
So,
myself. I want
wow.
it. Let's get Maaike.
Let's
And
get
oh, your
Maaike.
parents are here.
Yes. Hello to my
Love your
father's
mom.
wife. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Also,
well,
my
I always
mom.
feel like Biff in Back to the Future, but I'm like, say hi to your mom for me. Like, but I really wanted to.
My dad, who had a bad day at Wordle today, as did a lot of people.
A lot of people did.
Coach
Hello,
Woodard's here.
Coach. And Leslie's
Hola,
here.
Coach. Hi, Leslie. Good to see you. Let's grab Maaike. Hello. Welcome back to the show. Second time appearance now.
Hey.
So you've been up to some things. Still
I
doing
think
the soap. I feel like I should have gone to get it, but I have the little Fight Club, the red soap. I took it out of the wrapping because I like the smell of it so much, and now it's like stuck to my bookshelf. So it's gonna stay forever.
it's a permanent part of the decorations.
That's right.
But at least the room will smell good.
It does though. It's an interesting mix because we also had a couple candle makers on in the meantime, so I've got some of that. Hi, Chloe. Now, okay, so you've been supporting domestic violence survivors for a long time, and you're an artist on your own. So what's the new initiative? Like when did you decide to start helping other survivors through art?
Yeah, so you know, um, my story a little bit in that I used art to basically heal myself. And honestly, a lot of times it just was my sanity. I was like, I have so many feelings that there aren't really words around, and I will just take it to the canvas. And a lot of times, really loud music, and just work it out on the canvas. And in a way, I just felt like it was kind of like hot yoga, like what you figured out in the hot room, AKA the canvas, was transferable to life. And I feel like it sounds really abstract because as I've been talking about it the last 2 weeks, I feel like people are like, what the hell are you talking about? But when you start the process, you maybe are actually painting like some dark stuff, some angry stuff, confused stuff. You're basically just scratching out your experience on the canvas. Like I made a piece called Body Count that was about all of the school shootings,
Mm.
and I basically created like this, like a little kid painting, right? Like blue sky, green grass, yellow sun, and a rainbow, and like the ABCs and like things you would see at like first or second grade in a classroom. And then I just went crazy on it with like black and white and gray and blood red. And I just needed to get it out of my body. Like the number, and there were numbers of all the numbers of people that have died, kids
Mhm.
that have died. So it's like piles of numbers. And then things that I felt were true, like the US we started in blood, we started with genocide. And so the fact that our kids are now dying because of gun violence and we haven't done anything to end that, like I needed to get that out of my body. And when I was,
So it goes beyond domestic violence
yeah, well, I
to
mean, it's
other
just
kinds of.
about like getting your emotions out. So when we come back to like, what are those exercises going to be like? I'm going to walk people through like, okay, what I want you to do is put on the canvas, like, think about some of the worst experiences that you've had. And I want you to take the colors that that feels like to you. And I just want you to like make those shapes on the canvas. And then I'm going to use like legit abstract art techniques and strategies, teach those to them. And then we will actually, in one of the exercises, overwrite those, because abstract art has a lot of layers. So it's about learning that you will be able to overwrite those memories. And some of it may show through, right? Like our grief and our life process, it shows through. We move on. I'm good, but that informs who I am.
It
Like
seems
what
like
I've
a
been
messy
through.
process. Like a messy
It's
for you, messier for a room full of people doing the same thing. Like what does that
yeah,
look
and
like?
I mean it's pretty unrefined at this point still. It's laid out in my head, but I haven't written out the lessons yet. But it will be more organized when we get to that moment. But the point is, like, there will be other exercises, for instance, like when you are in a domestic violence situation or any situation where someone else is oppressing you and controlling what you do and say and think, um, you forget who you are. Your identity gets lost. So one of my exercises will be about collaging, where I really want people to sit with, like, what do I like? Me, myself. What don't I like that I've been pretending that I like? I mean, and I think as women, we live in the land of women, and Chris, no offense, but a lot of times we placate our partners by pretending that we like shit that we don't like, or we go along. And we're
I know Micah froze a
really
little bit.
start to like,
Micah, you're freezing a little
what
bit.
what
Ooh,
Uh-oh.
Micah froze. Let's have Micah refresh and come back. But I think that's a really interesting point that she's making, like about trying to rediscover yourself after domestic violence. I'm okay, refresh Micah, and then I was hoping we could get into the mechanism by which you're running this grant program, because it's very Web3, and I think some people would be interested in that.
Yeah, so this grant program is on Gitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency giving for social good platform. And it uses quadratic funding, which means people basically vote with their dollars, and who collects the largest number of votes by $1 increments, or however many. You can give more than one. But essentially, who has more supporters versus who has more dollars gets the lion's share of the matching funds pool.
Okay,
So it's
so it's
different
not
in
all
that,
about whales, like
yes,
people with the most money that throw it around and take over the space. This is
exactly.
different.
Yes. And they're doing cause rounds, and there is a DEI cause round. And a bunch of us have actually begun to work together collaboratively in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And that's going to go forward into the future, because people are working on really amazing programs that affect real things. Like We Seed is feeding people in food apartheid areas. Our 40 Acres is doing pretrial bail funds, archiving Black and Indigenous history in an open source library. Bougie Dao from Taiwan is like making Web3 accessible for people in Taiwan. Blue Dao and Take Up Space are creating onboarding, and 50 millimeter creating onboarding for people from LGBTQ and BIPOC communities to gain access to the technology with equipment and training and upskilling. So there's a lot of really cool things going on in that space, and really amazing people.
Well, it sounds like then this particular program, the common thread is social good of some kind, but the causes are very varied. So there should be something kind of for everybody.
Totally. There's science, there's finance, there's actually, they even have like gaming and other things that I'm really not into. But I think if you go on the Gitcoin.co site, like you can just search for whatever your interest is and support that. Women in Science, there's 11 grants with women in science, and they are basically deconstructing the power silo of information in science and also making it more accessible for women. Because myself, as a person that was a financial planner, I experience this all the time. You're the only woman in the space, and you're spoken to differently, you're treated differently, you are patronized and basically taught. Like, I was treated like a financial planner light, and I was like, I had my own practice for 7 years. I'm a financial planner, period. I might be blonde, but I'm not like the Malibu Barbie of municipal bonds. I'm a real whole financial planner.
We
Weird.
just had a group on a week or two ago who co-wrote a book together called You Should Smile More. And it's all these women who worked together in PepsiCo over the course of like a decade, and then went on to write this book about all those kind of microaggressions. You know, things like when they say the new girl in finance, where they would never say the new boy in finance. So
No,
there's a lot to
never.
unpack there.
I think Carrie was able to explain her dislike of the term female, and I just watched.
Right.
I just watched a pro speaker use that word like 100 times in her speech, and I was just like, every time I just thought Carrie would hate that. Carrie would hate that.
For one thing, it's very biological. For the other, you're like defining us as just the opposite of male. That's all we are. And I was
Right.
like, screw that.
Right.
Maaike, I have a definition question. What does quadratic friends mean?
Well, okay, so the funding pools and the matching on Gitcoin work with quadratic funding, which is like reference to the quadratic equation, right? Because you essentially, based on which tags you qualify for, touch various pools of money and blah blah blah. But we're just calling ourselves the quadratic friends because we're dorky.
But it just means pick whatever you want to support and you can support it.
Well, it means was specifically for the group that we've created, which is like 85 people now. Quadratic friends that are basically, we're all from the DEI round. I was going to say, like, there's different cause rounds, and apparently Gitcoin is going to do different rounds every time, because this happens every quarter. Like, they refill the pools of money every quarter, and people can get money for their grants. But the DEI round, they're going to keep every time, because the principle behind like all of Web3 is decentralization. And we will never have that if we don't like focus on uplifting who are not included now, who's disenfranchised now. And for me, it was really interesting because domestic violence at its core fundamentally is an imbalance of power, right? So at a cellular level, when we have solved domestic violence as a culture, that means we've focused on everyone's mental health. We have elevated those who are disenfranchised the most, because who is impacted the most by violent domestic violence? Like, I'm not talking about emotional, verbal violence. I mean physical. You're in the hospital. You were ran over by a car. Someone lit you on fire. You were killed. That's mainly who experiences that the most disproportionately is Black and Indigenous women. So when we have gotten to the point where we are, as a culture, are saying no to that and improving mental health, I feel like we're going to be, closer to that Star Trek moment where we actually have some like, sense of real equality, maybe minus the aliens. Carrie's like, what the heck did you talk about?
No, I freaking love Star Trek. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
I'm a
Trekkers.
nerd. Star Trek, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. I could go on, but I won't.
Right. Well, we love, like, I was so sad because Nichelle Nichols passed away, and I had met her at Comic-Con, and she was a Huru, and like that means freedom and independence in Swahili. And that's just like, they were doing so much. Like, Lucille Ball bought Star Trek. I'm like, if we could have a Star Trek future, that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
I want a replicator.
Yes.
What?
that
That's
would be
all I
dope.
want.
A replicator's lovely. All right, so I have a question. One thing that I always think when I think these things, especially about domestic violence, especially when you said a lot of Black and Indigenous people, the number's even higher. I also think that it's a lot higher for trans women. And I was curious
Yes.
if there's any part of this project that has anything to do with trans people.
Well, yeah. So always in my mind is like all of these intersectional spaces, and it's so large, right? So for the moment, I'm starting from the square that I'm standing on because this is where I'm the most familiar with. I'm not a trans person. I am going to meet up with one of my friends who is an Indigenous Two Spirit, and she's an artist, and we are going to collaborate. But I need more collaborators before I even attempt to speak on that because that's not my space, and I
Cool.
would not want to do that. Also, our project needs more collaborators because
How let's talk about that then. And thank you, by the way, because I don't know what parts you do or don't do. Tell me a little bit about how do you earn more collaborators? How does that part of this work? One of the things that when that technology Clubhouse came out, I hated it. And the reason I hated it was because it was like high school again. There's like 4 people in the front of the room, and then everyone else has to raise their hand to try to get a voice. And I thought that was dopey. I hate anywhere where there's not like a this kind of a movement. Um, how does that work in Web3? How does collaboration work in your world, in your project?
Yeah. Okay. So at first, I'm going to agree with you about the Clubhouse thing. I was never in Clubhouse, but I ran my first Twitter space yesterday. And I basically gave microphones to as many people as I could and was like, behave like adults and let's have a conversation. This isn't a performance. Like, we're not children. Um, how I'm going to gain collaborators is just work with people that I already know. It's just that everything has come together so quickly and people are traveling and we haven't had a chance to build a team that is solid enough to bring forward. So we'll have collaborators based on relationship and who deserves a place at the table, which is everybody, right? But sorry about that. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and I don't know how that like relates to like Web3 in specific, other than we're available for conversations. Um,
Do you think though that
the
sort of
space that we're going to
keeps out
create
some people who might want to contribute but aren't comfortable with the technology? Like how do you basically get the largest pool of
level it.
recruiters when there's such a narrow gate to pass through? Like you have to
Well, I
understand
mean, to
Web3 and
what
crypto.
Yeah. So there won't be currency. Like you won't need currency to be a participant. Just because it's built on the blockchain doesn't mean that you have to have cryptocurrency or tokens to participate. We're going to do as much as we can to keep the barriers to entrance as low as possible. I mean, we can't avoid the fact that people will have to have a computer or a phone, but in real life, I'm going to do these workshops in real life, you know, and so we'll pay for the supplies and things and video, and it won't cost money. And I'm definitely going to bring food because from my experience, who I have interacted with the most is moms with kids, and we're always like, what do moms and kids need? Food, and to not have to pay for things because they're already paying for everything. And, I think it's important. Including the children is very important because who grows up who grows up to be domestic violence offenders? 75% experience domestic violence in their household when they were young. And so we are working on adjusting identity, right? We are saying, no, you have a different identity other than what you are living in or what you're being subjected to. You have an inner world that is creative and beautiful and belongs to you and is valuable. And we'll be reinforcing that and giving them something else to identify themselves as. Like, I'm an artist, or even if I'm not like an artist that wants to be an artist in life, like these are my interests, and like redefining themselves for themselves. Do you know what I'm saying?
For sure.
So,
Maaike, hang tight. We have a quick tiny little bit of ads. We're going to stick you backstage for a second because I forgot to do them at the beginning of the show. Hey,
Oh,
if you want a
yeah.
show like this and you want to ask some questions, you can do it. You can just make your own little show. Go to cbrogan.net/StreamYard and you can have a show. Want a podcast? Get one. Castos.com. Want a .online domain? Get one. cbrogan.net/online. Hey, want to search things at a different search engine? Presearch.com. Done.
Yeah, forget the other one.
Did I miss an
The
ad?
other
Oh, yeah,
one.
forget that other, search
Right, the
engine.
other
I was
search
very
engine,
lost.
yeah.
Don't push that button because I'm going to push
Ha
this
ha ha
button.
ha.
Maaike,
Okay,
there you go.
fussy.
Welcome back.
Oh, you. So I'm thinking that although the technology that powers all these initiatives might be a little advanced for some people, at its root, it's social good and care for others, which is the foundation of most good societies. So I feel like it's good to get the word out about it and to help people who are scared of crypto understand they can still participate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that from the user standpoint that it will read really any differently than Web 2 does, right? Like social media. I would like to have the website be basically where people can create an identity to use. Like when you set up a Facebook account, you put a name, but it has to be yours because they want to verify your identity. On our site, we don't want that because a lot of times people who are dealing with or have dealt with domestic violence, we have security issues. Like I'm still a part of the address confidentiality program because so you'll be able to choose an anonymous name and then build a gallery of your work, and we're still working out to find you could upload pictures of your work, or I lost you guys.
Yeah, your Wi-Fi is a little janky.
In the future, I'd like for people to be able to use digital art and transfer it into their gallery and maybe even diary some of their experience, because it's really empowering for people that are still stuck in a bad situation to read about the journey of people that are like a few steps in front of them, like it's a long process. I basically just took 5 years and was like, I'm not going to date. I am focused on my kids and my figuring out what is going on with me, because something was going on with me. Like I was making really terrible choices and I needed to figure out why. Why am I choosing to be in these situations? Not that I was to blame, to make that clear. Who decides to be abusive, that is on them. But it also was on me to understand that I should have walked away. From the very first red flag, I should have been like, I'm out. But I didn't know that because I didn't have those skills and I had never practiced. So, to go back to some of the exercises, we're going to talk about boundaries, where you end and I begin. Really, there's going to be more than just art, right? We're going to talk about why are we talking about lines and shapes and defining, because it's important to know, this is me and my boundaries, and I have the right to say no, and I have the right to just say I'm not going to have you in my circle or whatever. And sometimes who experiences domestic violence they've never known that they have that right. Most of the people that are experiencing domestic violence are between 18 and 24, and the statistics diminish from there. And so it's learning. Carrie,
Yeah, I'm
you
sure
have
not
such a
taking
quizzical
anything.
look on your face.
I was just thinking about my sophomore year, no, freshman year of college, how I got in a relationship with a guy who turned out to be a real jerk and definitely engaged in some emotional abuse. And I would not have tolerated it. It was sort of like putting a frog in the pot of water and turning up the heat slowly. It was like that. I
Totally.
didn't recognize it because I had not experienced it, not in my
Right.
home growing up. So to me, it was completely new. But once I realized, I gave him a big bucket of never freaking talk to me again. Boy, was he
Right.
pissed when that day arrived.
But that's very typical. It's very uncommon for an abusive situation to start off with somebody punched you in the face. That's not how it starts. The statistics show us it starts with verbal and mental abuse and then escalates from there. Which is why a long time ago, I was a dispatcher at the sheriff's department, and we would get domestic violence calls, and it would really be awful because you could like watch it over a period of months, like escalate, and you would be telling the girl, like, you need to leave. You would be trying, like, as much as it was within your power in that role, we have resources available for people that are experiencing domestic violence. I can give you numbers. We can try to send a DART team, which is like a domestic violence response team. Do you want resources? And if they weren't ready, or if they were still like, I wrote in my grant, like, it's very difficult to make phone calls when you have a domestic terrorist like towering over you in your home.
Yeah, that's it's you're not exactly feeling all that empowered in that moment. I have a couple
Absolutely,
questions.
Leslie, there's definitely a grooming period.
I would imagine that's true. Um, and also, hi Elizabeth. She couldn't make the beginning of the show because she was over at Al-Anon learning boundaries. So there you go. When you talked about art and you talked about abstract art and the layers and all that, I get excited about that because I do like that idea that you lay down one piece of scenery and then you say, now let's paint over it, let's do a thing. And that's visual art is an amazing thing. Is this purely visual art or journals, plays, etc.? Like how does it, because not everyone is going to go to paint. I go to a journal. What happens there? That's my question.
Yeah, and it's so great that you brought that up, because with the galleries that people will make for their collections, I want them to have like a journaling feature, because you're right. Sometimes people will write out their feelings, and they can choose like if they want to make it public or private. And again, like, they have the anonymity, because number one, they need to be able to see their progression as a person as they go through. They'll be able to look back like a year ago and be like, oh, I have grown. And, or I forgot that lesson that I learned, and remind themselves. And if they're comfortable, they will be able to share it. As far as plays and things, like, I don't know how that would work. I'm planning to have like different readings available on the website so that people, because they'll get those different prompts, right? And different perspectives. There's so many perspectives, and definitely it shouldn't just be me like putting my thing out there, you know?
Sure. That makes sense. Well, we've come to the part of the show where we ask every single guest, you've done this before, the same question, which is what goes in your backpack? It could be something physical, it could be something metaphorical. We've had a pretty heavy topic today, but I bet there's something we should add to the backpack as it relates to this project. What should we?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking all about this, and I came up, obviously, like, we have love and sunshine is kind of our thing. And we just made like a new window cling that says surround the world with love and sunshine. So that was on my mind as it relates to like the soap and candle company. And I thought about persistence, and creativity. But for me, I think today, based on the last 2 weeks, like, what I carry in my backpack, but didn't like realize how big of a part of me it was, is a heart that really yearns for justice. Like, we should, if every person had that in their backpack, I just feel like we would be in a much better place.
Super. All right. You did it. You succeeded. We made it happen. We're at the very end of another backpack show. I'm not talking about my grandmother. It just won't happen.